Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Brussels. This episode today is going to be a bit different from what we normally do. Today, we have a guest, which is something that we feel incredibly privileged from. The reason why we invited Javier into the podcast is because Javier is one of those people with whom you can talk for hours about different topics, and you will always leave the conversation feeling like either you learned something or you challenged your thoughts and what you believed. And I think that is very refreshing in someone. Some months ago, actually, he gave us the idea and the context to publish an episode which was called Masculinity in Crisis, following the publication of his article, which was titled How Young Men's Economic Decline Fuels the Anti-Feminist Backlash, which you will be able to read in the European Policy Center website. Javier is from Valencia. He's a policy analyst at the European Policy Center. It's important that you say he's from Valencia. He cooks very well. A teaching associate at Sciences Po Paris and a PhD candidate at the University of Edinburgh. He's co-editor of the book Inequality in Spain and researches mainly about inequality, the far right, and youth politics. He also co-founded and is deputy director of the Future Policy Lab, an intergenerational public policy think tank. So thank you very much for taking the time to be here with us on a Monday evening after work.
Thank you very much for having me.
So today we are going to have our typical conversation, but this time is going to be even more natural because we're going to be engaging with Javier in what he knows best, and I hope that he's going to challenge us also on what we know. Maybe I would like to start by creating a connection here with another one of your studies, which is not the one that I have mentioned, published as part of the book Inequality in Spain, written also with Berna León and Javier Soria, because it's an essay, where you cover the issues that lead to inequality through genetics. You even wrote a column in El País a couple of years ago, which is very interesting. If you have a subscription to El País, you should go read it, where you talk about a study that you did in the Future Policy Lab on meritocracy. There is a part of this study that I thought it was very, very interesting, in which you create this connection between genetics and inequality, and you call it the social lottery. So where and when you're born, basically, I think that is more what you want to say, is something that individuals cannot control. You are born where you are, and by the time that you are, and you cannot really choose if you're going to be wealthier or if you're going to be in a very humble family. So therefore, the concept of meritocracy, which we have also touched upon in one of our episodes, would not depend solely on how much effort we make to achieve X thing that we would like to do. So my question to you, Javier, is how did you become so interested in this topic? And what was the biggest surprise or reflection that you arrived while writing this chapter on genetics and inequality? And what gave you some type of connector to the masculinity and femininity issues?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you, everyone. So the interest in inequality came from basically living in London and experiencing real life inequality there and how different it is to live in London if you have money and if you don't have money. And the interest in genetics came more from actually conversations with conservative friends and discussions on, biology, the trans issue, etc., etc. And they had all this idea that, we should go to biology and check it there and see what it says there. And so I did. And I think they were right in the sense that biology matters, and they were wrong in their interpretation of what biology says. Actually, what is interesting is that most people who claim to be defending some form of biology in politics have a kind of very far right or conservative view, but actually most biologists are quite progressive, and there is kind of a more progressive liberal interpretation of this. And I combined these two while checking inequality, right? So one of the biggest arguments in favor of inequality is, well, it's just a question of natural talents, right? It's just an issue of you are different individuals and have different talents, and that is what creates differences, not social elements. And actually, when the interesting thing is that genetics tells us a very different story, a very, very different story. So there is evidence that genetics matters to explain your education level. That by knowing your DNA, we can more or less try to predict to a little percentage what your education level is going to be. But the interesting thing is, how is that possible? Because it's not really because there's any inherent better genetics that one has over the other, but quite the opposite. There are simply genetics, capabilities, abilities, types of bodies that are more valued socially than others. That's the key element. So imagine that you're very good at math, right? You have a natural talent at math, okay? You're born today, you can earn a lot of money, maybe becoming a programmer or doing some kind of job like that. But imagine that you were born in the Middle Ages, where what mattered was physical strength to work the land. Your natural talent in mathematics is not any luck anymore. It's actually quite, you're untalented in that kind of society. So it doesn't matter just kind of the social lottery and the genetic lottery, but also the lottery of social values, of being lucky enough to be born in a society that values your abilities, right? So for example, I'm probably the best player at Connect 4. Like I'm just very good at Connect 4, okay? But there's no tournaments, no money for Connect 4. If I was good at chess, I could become very rich. Connect 4, nobody cares about that game, right? So I'm just unlucky that I've been born in a society that doesn't care about that. So the interesting thing about going to genetics is that it comes back to society and it tells us, actually, there's no such a thing as natural talent. There's socially valued abilities and not socially valued abilities, but there's no natural talent. And that was very surprising to me to find out. And the good news about that is that we can change that. We can make a society that values more different types of bodies, more different types of abilities, more different types of genes. And that is, I think, a very kind of positive reading while saying that genetics matter at the same time.
Okay. That's very interesting. I had never actually thought about it, but it's true that, for example, now, I think in the EU bubble, people tend to be asked to be good with languages, for example, because if not, you cannot work in here. But it's true that if you had been born in a world where there is no interconnection between countries, that talent would be useless in a way. So
exactly. Also, one of the things about the Brussels bubble is that Brussels probably brings together the biggest collection of extroverts of the whole European Union, right? So nearly everyone here is an extrovert, right? And that is just, but that doesn't mean that, imagine that you're an introvert, doesn't mean that you do politics worse or you're less able, but probably you have more difficulties advancing in the EU bubble than if you're an extrovert, right? So it's not just a matter of your genetics, but also about, what is valued here.
Okay.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, actually, like inequality in this sense, it starts really before birth. Like, it's you just are born in a country that doesn't give you opportunities. It gives you maybe poor access to healthcare or to education, to a safe home. I mean, let's compare now. I mean, the obvious. Let's say a baby born now in Belgium and versus a baby born in Palestine at the moment. Imagine the inequality. So they already start 10 steps behind. So it's like this, and of course. I think genetics and the early environment determine this kind of like mental health, like economic, educational development, and the cognitive ability of people. And we should look more into this, like when we have meritocracy as well. Like there are some people that come here in Brussels and they work all their lives to get to this job, and then there are people just like, this is normal because my parents put me in this school, this and that, and it's very easy for me to speak with X person, and we can get an internship there or like that. It's some people get it easier, other people really work for it, as we discussed also in our meritocracy episode. So maybe you can check more details on that.
Check that out.
Yeah.
Can I add something?
Sure.
It's not an issue of different places, which is completely the case and it's super obvious, but also of time. Today, the ability to progress socially if you come from a lower income household, compared to our parents' possibilities or our grandparents' possibilities, is much lower now. So the social left, kind of the ability to kind of meritocracy has become much less a reality in our generation than in previous generations. So this is something that it's really worrisome and that we should address. And also it's an issue that this is economically problematic. It's not just a question of redistribution of wealth, but it's also a problem for production of wealth. And we're less well off because of this.
But now we would like to also move to the other parts of your studies. So basically the one that you are doing the most now, which is analyzing masculinity, feminism, and the far right. There is one thing that got my attention from the study that you did with the Policy Center, which you mentioned that to engage men more effectively, democratic forces should highlight the masculinity values it upholds while showcasing real-life examples of men who are progressive and are inclusive in the forms and in the ways that they act in their everyday life. However, in the meantime, we have examples such as conservative author Charlie Kirk. I don't know if you have heard of this author, but is conservative author in the US, who says, and I quote, this can be found online, "We have first wave feminism, which gave women the right to vote. We have second wave feminism, which made women go and work outside the homes. And then we have the third wave of feminism, which is irreconcilable with any decent society, and it is women hating on men." How else would you think our society, women and progressive men, could engage socially more effectively, as you were saying, for attracting or showing people like Charlie Kirk that there are other ways to think, more progressive ways?
It's a big question.
You can break it down.
Take it easy. Okay, so just super short to explain. I think a great deal of the backlash against feminism from a lot of young men that we're seeing at the moment. Normally it's thought just in cultural terms, right? So it's normally probably was just an issue of, you have men that had privilege, now you're losing that privilege, and that it will create a kind of a backlash. And that's it. It's just a question of culture and a question of that. And that is certainly true. There's a lot in that. But my argument is to say, hey, careful, there's also a big economic argument here, right? So young men have seen a strong decline in income, in wealth, in purchasing power, in housing, a possibility of buying a house, in levels of employment, in basically every single area. Because every young person has suffered that. It's not just young men, but also young men and young women. But the issue with young men, there are two specific things. One, they go to university much, much less than young women. Much, much less. So around 10 to 15% percentage points less in the whole European Union. And also what we see, and this was, and I was completely surprised when I found out this, that in a lot of countries, in a lot of Western European countries, the gender pay gap has reversed for under 25s. So young women under 25 in a lot of Western European countries earn more than young men. Not much more, but just a little bit more. And again, most young people under 25 don't work, but those that work, women are more. Which is, there's an economic basis of, being angry at the economic situation that then is politicized by mostly progressive forces for young women and politicized by far-right forces for young men. And there are many reasons for this. It's pretty clear that if you have a situation where young women departed from a very, very bad situation and the trend is positive, very slow with a lot of regressions, but the trend is mildly positive, while for men it's negative, it's much easier to articulate a discourse of nostalgia, right? So look at the past, we were better before, the future is going to be even worse. So far right kind of thrives in that context, right? And also there's been an issue about this kind of criticism of masculinity, which is super necessary because it's super problematic. A lot of men should just go to a lot of this could just be solved by a lot of men going to therapy, period. That's true. But I think there's also a real thing here when we say it's not clear to a lot of young men what is exactly how to be successful with the things that they want in a way that is compliant with gender equality and really kind of doing things good. And I always make this question. In the case of feminism, you have this plethora of ideal people, of idols. You have Marie Curie, you have Frida Kahlo, you have Simone de Beauvoir. But what about men? What examples do we have of successful men that other young men can look up to, but are positive in their masculinity? I always ask this question. I'm gonna ask this question to you. Do you have any idea or any image of what would be the man that you want? Like that, just like it's positive, but it's successful. But that is important. That is to point, masculine, but with a positive masculinity.
Nowadays, well,
Mine is in the first row, so I cannot really. I cannot say anything else.
indeed,
It's,
you don't have a lot of role models.
we don't have a lot of role models.
Yeah.
Which and this is a problem. This is a problem from any kind of social change point of view. We humans, we see people that we like what they're doing, we see that they're valued, and we say, okay, I want to be like that person. And then as you grow up, you might change a little bit, you might be more like that or not, or you find different ways of existing, but you need role models. And there are basically no positive role models. The mentions that I get is sometimes Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal is the one that is mentioned by some people.
Come to the podcast.
Some actor, yes, come to the podcast definitely. Some actors, you got Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, that kind of your surname has to finish in Al maybe to be considered, but but really it's very difficult to find that.
Yeah.
And so without a positive thing, you need to criticize on the one side, but without a positive future, it's impossible to convince any young man when they're offered something positive on the other side, right? So the far right is telling you, you have troubles with your life. Your life, they say literally, your life is awful. Not to say another word, but if you work hard, if you don't complain at work, if you go to the gym, then you will get everything that you want. There's not such a thing from kind of the more progressive or feminist side where it tells you, if you do this, you will get the things that you want, which sometimes, it's reasonable things. You just want love, you want to be appreciated, you want social status, you want... Some of this stuff is not, pure aggression or pure domination. It's just things that everyone wants, which is to be respected in society. So that's something that I think we haven't worked that much for very good reasons, because we were kind of focusing on much more pressing stuff. But at this point, the backlash is just getting so strong that we need to do more.
Yeah. What more? I think I think that is a bit the issue that I find with this topic, because I there is a part of me that fully agrees with you.
Okay,
fully. But then there is another part that I feel like we're a bit stuck as society. Mm-hmm. Because the more you talk about some of these issues, the more you become a feminazi. The more, that is true, I'm sorry, but that is the point. Like, in the moment, at least when I have had these conversations with people who are not progressists, okay, because progressive people, of course, it's very easy to talk among ourselves. But when you don't talk to someone who has a progressive mindset, first, yeah, you're a woke, you're a feminazi, you just want to hate on men, and it's like, no, I'm just complaining because, I'm sorry, but 91% of the mothers spend most of the time after work at home with their kids. Because the majority of the house chores that right now are happening in the houses, like cooking, cleaning, that falls within women, even if they have an external job. And also in jobs that we have, for example, you were mentioning the gaps, but there is also this added issue, mental problems that we are facing as women, for example, as the imposter syndrome. For women, it takes much more effort and courage to apply to positions of management than for men. Mm-hmm. And I see that in my everyday life. I've seen men, I'm sorry for that if some of you feel affected by this, but I've seen some men who are above, and I feel like, where did you get your title, in a fair? I mean, I'm sorry, but and then you feel super tight and super afraid when you have an interview, even if it's for I feel like women are constantly having to apologize for existing in the men's world, and I am done with it. Yeah. So when I see these men like incels, who blame women for their not successful life, well, I mean, back in the days when in the 50s everyone was completely medicated, women were completely medicated, it was the Xanax and Prozac era, I'm guessing that there were also men that were not successful then. So who were they blaming then? Because women were at home. We had a traditional role. So I feel like we're just the guinea pig of society, and we're just always blamed. So that is a bit the intersection. I would like to know what you think, Jan, about this. Because
Please.
Yeah, we with the fact with the women, we definitely like we live still in a society that has the idea of a woman doing the jobs of the house, and this is a full-time job, that's for sure. But I would really love, I see this progress in men going out with the kid, cleaning the dishes, taking care of himself as a normal human being, which should be normal. But on the other side, what you were saying about a bit of a toxic masculinity, these far right trends, they really pushes on the emotional, like they trigger the emotional instability, let's say, in this sense to men. It validates their anger with the system, with their economic decay, with the jobs, and in this community they get to get a tribe, and they also, like, the far right gives them like responses like, let me give you an enemy, and the enemy is the feminists or the immigrants, or like you name it. So it's something against the system, so they are also like backlashing the system. So for instance, with the feminists, like, they are feeling attacked by these more progressive ideas, because they are thinking that this challenges the traditional roles that they should have. Like, I'm the provider, I bring the bread on the table, I have a strong masculinity, etc. And this criticizing of the male behavior, it makes them feel more like attacked, and they are losing a bit of they feel like they are threatened, they are losing their space in the society. The same with immigrants, they are coming to take our jobs, they're la la la. So that's it. And I wanted to make also a reference to Pedro Pascal, what you said.
Okay.
So it's like Pedro Pascal versus Andrew Tate. Kind of like, Pedro Pascal is the angel, Andrew Tate is more like a demon. But the thing is, with the Pedro Pascal, apparently psychologically, people get to tend to romanticize these beautiful faces, etc. Like, I don't know if you remember that criminal in the US, the Italian nice young guy that he killed someone
he
and
murdered
then
the CEO.
exactly
Luigi
and,
Mangione.
exactly, and he was so like romanticized by
Yeah.
women and stuff. And also Andrew Tate, with his anger and a lot of anti-feminist movements, versus this kind of like Bad Bunny, Pedro Pascal, or so we have still some role models, but it depends also on what part of the society they point to, you know. So we should definitely try to find more role models that like, let's say, for instance, the founding fathers of the European Commission, but we don't know how they were in real life, okay. It's but from the educational point of view, etc., they should be a role model. But that's
Okay, let's unpack here. So let me just do a couple of caveats, and then I'll push you more. But So first, I mean, just to be clear, I'm talking about the couple of things that are mostly problematic for young men, and it's really an issue of working class young men. This is really important, because young men that go to university and study engineering, they're as good as ever, actually way better probably than before, and difference is better. We're talking about young men that, don't go to university, which is an increasing number. So just to be clear, but apart from these kind of working class young men, the rest of the data, it's way worse for women than for men, in the sense that they're worse in basically any indicator that we can think of, right? And also, and very importantly, with time, right? So really, the big difference, the big issue, the big moment for the production of the gender pay gap is becoming a mother. That's really a child penalty, right? So by the time that people become 30 something, which is when normally, people tend to have kids, then the gender gap reverses, and it's really, favoring men, and it remains like that for very long, right? So just to be clear, that's that. Second, I am not proposing, and I don't think we should be proposing any kind of moderation of feminism or anything like that. One reason is the basic social justice reason, which you just mentioned, but other is an electoral reason. So anytime, and we know that there's every single time that there's a feminist law, especially laws, there's always a backlash. There's always going to be a backlash. So the question is, if there's going to be a backlash, you better do something that is worth doing. Because there's going to be a backlash. You want to have enough people supporting you, attracting enough women to support your policies. Because if not, you'll just have your men going against you, and then the numbers will not add up. In the sense that the backlash is going to be there regardless. So you better do something that attracts enough and mobilizes enough your base support. But what I do think is that there has been a bit of a lack of engagement with. So my point is here, not do less, but we need to do more. So we need to continue with all this kind of anger towards patriarchy, that is very fair, and do more and also speak to the men. Because if not, it's a question of numbers. The first rule of politics is to know how to count. That is, I think, a quote by Lyndon B. Johnson. And it's just a matter of, and in our democratic societies, it's a matter of votes. And if you have just more men voting for far-right parties and backlash policies, then they will get to government. Trump, we have the case of Bulgaria and some laws, Hungary, you have even Sweden, backtracking on a lot of progressive laws that we had there. So it's a question of numbers, and it's a question of politics and social movement. So I understand. One of the sentences that I dislike the most is this idea of it's not my job to educate you. Have you ever heard this, right? Like, it's not educate yourself. It's not my job to educate you. You should become progressive on your own, okay? No single social movement has ever had success doing that. Like, you cannot tell someone, just educate yourself. We need to do this effort. And if you are kind of committed to the change, that's something that we need to do. So, this is unfortunate because what I'm telling you is I understand your anger. The problem is if you want change, you have to do way more. And that is an awful thing to say, but it's just how politics works. And in the end, what matters is the change, not just the complaint. So I think that's unfortunately what we have to do. So yeah, that's what I would answer. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts or your pushbacks.
Actually, you mentioned earlier, and also you mentioned in your article that in some of the EU countries, young men now out-earn young women now out-earn men under 25, and they are more likely to hold the degrees, leading to perception among some men that they are being replaced in the society. So men are more affected by job loss, and they are more affected by economic instability, and because their identity is strongly linked with what I said before with the provider, there is a lack of, and also they have a bit of a lack of emotional support from the community because they don't receive it, because they were not taught by the society or allowed, let's say, by the society to express their frustrations. How can we, this is for both of you, how can we make the society fairer in this way? How can we talk about gender equality in a way that doesn't feel like a threat to the man's identity? And how can we reshape this masculinity but in the progressive way? And so that they don't feel attacked by these progressive ideas. And
also a difficult question. Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, we should be talking more about specific men problems. I'm gonna give you an example, a very simple example. It's incredible the amount of men that suffer from performance issues in the bed. I'm just gonna put an example like this. Okay. And you know what is funny about this? I have a lot of examples, and most of them I know because my female friends told me about them, not the guy friends, right? So these issues, we barely talk about them, and it's still kind of laughable if a guy talks about his problems in the bed, that kind of thing. It gets to the core of what it means to be a man, and that's something that I think we should be talk more about. So that would be number one. Number two is to adopt a gender perspective, and a gender perspective it's not just a woman's perspective. So, for example, we know that young men do worse in school. They just simply do worse, because in school it's just you have to be there, just follow the norm, just be there, seated, quiet, like the audience is doing now, very lovely, but just listening to some random guy or female, actually mostly it's normally a female teacher, talk about something for an hour, at the very least. And so that's something that you need to comply with the norm, and just kind of be seated and quiet and paying attention. And we know from a lot of research that in general, women follow way more the social norms than men do. And so we know that young men do worse in education. So, and they have more issues of abandonment of school. They have lower grades. So this is, the thing of not going to university is not just an issue that starts there, but it starts way earlier. So that's something that we should be thinking about, that that's something that a gender lens to adopt that would be a very cool thing to do. Another example, we spend a lot of money on trying to put women into STEM, right? But we spend basically €0 trying to put men into HEAL jobs. HEAL meaning health, education, arts, and literacy, But we need both. And a great deal of this is just improve the working conditions of female-dominated jobs, like nurses. Okay, just pay them more and then you will have that. But the case of, for example, doctors is a very good example. In Spain, 76% of all medical students are female. That's a very good job. You get good income, you get job security. That's something that we should probably want to have a balance on both sides. So we want more women engineers and we want more male nurses. And we need to do both to get gender equality. So that's very simple. And then the last point, I think we need to redefine what is success for being a man. The whole point of accumulation of power is to protect, is to give, is like, it's not just, what men care about a lot is social status. That's what we care about. But we need to redefine this, that we don't give social status to the person that is very rich or to the person that has a lot of capacity to do whatever he wants, but to the person that helps the most, to the person that has moral ambition, not just ambition, moral ambition, So we need to bring back this heroism, this thing that we value in society, these men that have done the most to help those that are in need or to help those that are, in a disadvantaged situation. That is kind of, I think, the thing that we should be, moving to redefining masculinity. And it's something, very simple, but that is the kind of men that we should be valuing in society. And if we value that, young men will go to that because they will see a role model that is successful. And this person gets income, this person gets, attractiveness, this person gets, social status. Then that is one way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting because actually, in one of our episodes, I think it was in the meritocracy episode, if I'm not mistaken, we were talking about how companies and the professional world encourages and rewards certain behaviors. And for example, one example that we gave was when you sit an interview, you're never asked how much it costed you to get where you are. They ask you about your studies, they ask you how many masters you have, how many languages you master, but then they never ask you how good of a colleague will you be, how empathetic you are, how well do you, the typical one of, have you worked in teams? We all have done that. Even if you do it badly, you can answer that question. And then you get a lot of people in very high positions politically and also in the private sector who had zero empathy and who are actually not good people in general. No, in the EU bubble, I think this is what we call sharks, but it's true. And that is something that I have also seen. You mentioned in men, but I have also seen in women. For example, I've seen a lot of articles lately of women who were entrepreneurs and who became senior management and some of them, owners of their own companies. And they were explaining how this mentality that they were taught to be successful of, okay, you need to be a shark, you need to be strong, you need to be harsh, you need to be, that actually burnt them out. And they were like, in the moment I started connecting with my more human side, so to listen to people, to ask my teams where they need it, to become a leader instead of a boss, that's when I started to be myself and to be okay, you know? So I think it's very interesting what you're saying, that from a societal perspective, we should start having more, views on moral ambition instead of economic ambition. But how would you do this? Because I think from our side, I remember we were brainstorming about, yeah, maybe asking in interviews, maybe when you have to do these reports, midterm reports in your jobs, maybe to actually emphasize that a person is good. But aside from that, what do you think that we could do to promote these moral values more? And moral, I mean, not moral in the sense of religion. Don't get me wrong, but in the sense of society.
That's a very good question. I mean, the most obvious answer is just, in the media, kind of that this is the narratives and these are the men that we are kind of, men or women and kind of people that we are emphasizing and we are stressing that they're valued. So I think, just being like, Elon Musk is not just like, this guy is an awful parent, he's an awful father. Elon Musk has all the capacity to change an election in a country, but for what? What are you doing? With your life? What is your legacy? In that, it's one of attacking the vulnerable. Is one of basically damaging and eroding democracy. That is going to be the legacy, and that is what we should be criticizing. So, big answer is just media. Another answer is organization, and this is also one of the big things that we have a problem with in the left, which is. Awareness is probably overrated. We need to be focusing on social change that we can do and act. And actually, one of the funny things about social change is that there's very little social demographics that explain why people engage in social change or have moral ambition or not. A big issue is, are they being asked? Are they offered the opportunity to engage in a context where they can make a change? And if you do that, if you go and ask people, if you offer people that place, most of the people will probably say yes. And there's this very nice example of a little Dutch town, I forgot the name, and they make a study of how many people were helped by the locals, how many Jewish people were helped by the locals to be hidden during the Second World War. Mm-hmm. And they tried to find out what difference between the houses that hid some people and the houses that did not. And the main difference is they were asked by some of the members of the community that were really active into that, And some people were asked, and some people were kind of forced, and then they did that, and they helped many people to escape kind of the Nazi army. So it's an issue of providing these opportunities. Sometimes in local context, but it's really a question of asking. We should just go much more bluntly to ask people, hey, do something, change, this is easy to do, here's the opportunity to do it. And can I say something about the women?
Sure.
Which is funny. Like, we talk about young men, but we are also seeing a regression among young women. In a lot of countries, especially Spain, since 2018, what we see is like young women go to the left, and since 2022, 2023, they go back to the right. So we're seeing a lot of right content is also attracting a lot of young women. So it's not just an issue of young men, it's an issue of everyone. And the problem is, when you get to 30, 35, women and men vote more or less the same. They vote more or less the same for the far right. Not because young men vote less, but because older women vote more. So the way that this kind of ideological gender gap gets solved is in favor of the far right. That's really problematic. Sorry, just want to mention that.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned feminism, I think there is now a new feminist battleground with this far right influence. So I think on one side we have the trad wife, like the traditional women that they are really influenced and also promote themselves motherhood, some of them submission, domesticity, and yes, they are linked to these traditionalist, nationalist ideas, and there's also another example with let's say with the entrepreneurs women let's give an example of like the OnlyFans.
Yeah.
And this became like a new way of fighting the system, being outside the traditional behaviors, kind of like a rebel to have a financial independence. And the thing is, they're also vulnerable to exploitation.
Yeah.
It's because of the far right, because again, the far right goes on the emotional spectrum.
Yeah.
They don't go with moralizing ideas and concepts as usually the system of like the states and the left usually do. So the far right goes more on the, you have a real problem. You have, I'll give you a solution. Take it and go for it. Only that, let's say, for instance, the women that they do OnlyFans, sometimes they are getting there because they are in a precarious financial situation that they don't have any other solution. So they are trying to go there, and there's like, yes, I can control myself, I can control the system. And of course, this is also something like rebel against the patriarchy. But sometimes even this OnlyFans system, it's controlled by the patriarchy somehow, you know. So they are exposed to vulnerability, even though like they seek to have an identity, they seek to have safety, and I think even though they have this kind of like personal businesses, women are still judged, are still like sexualized, and overall underpaid in the society. And sometimes this is not their freedom. They like, because it's a power that it has to, they look for this like kind of power, but this is imposed somehow by the system because the economy is not helping them.
Yeah.
So that
No, I agree. I mean, I think that the big explanation here is the labor market is awful. Period. You know, period. I mean, but and I think these two things are linked, and because of the economy, like, it's just so much cheaper to share a house than to just buy a house on your own or to rent a house on your own. So it's extremely normal that we live in a situation where it just, it permeates to the culture, the financial sense that it makes to just have a partner, because that makes you just pay less rent. So I think that a big deal of a big deal of what is going on has just to do with that, in the sense that in a situation where the labor market is so unstable, we crave stability in our personal life. We crave stability in our finances, and just that's I think the underpinning of all of that, and also of OnlyFans. OnlyFans is this, for me, it's the same phenomena as Bitcoin. It's an issue of money, like working. It's no longer giving you what you want. It's no longer gonna provide. You have this promise of the middle class. You work hard, and you get a house. You will get a job. You will get the possibility of having a family, of having kids, and if it goes really well, you can maybe have a second house. That's not the case anymore.
No.
So then, what you're doing is trying to get out of the labor market as soon as possible. That Beacon is that, buying lottery ticket, it's that, and OnlyFans is that. I remember one of our reels that I saw a couple of weeks ago, and it was from an OnlyFans content creator, and the reels was something like, "Aren't you scared of doing OnlyFans?" And the video was like, "What I'm really scared about is having a job, working from 9 to 8, not being able to buy a house, not being able to really afford holidays." That is what she was kind of really scared about. And it's this whole element of like, I want to get outside of the labor market because the labor market no longer works. And that is because there's a huge increase in inequality, to go back to the first question, to the first element. And it's because we don't have enough opportunities for young people. And it's just an economic issue. So a great deal of this backlash will be solved by addressing the economic problem of young people.
Actually, I wanted to say something on what you mentioned, both of you, because it's very funny when we talk about trad wives. I am fascinated by trad wives. It's like watching Mad Men but in the 21st century. And one thing that I will never get over with is this idea of, yeah, I'm a stay-home mom. You're not a stay-home mom. You are teleworking.
Full job.
Okay. You have a full job, which is content creation. You have a full job, which is giving you thousands and sometimes millions of dollars and euros for you to stay at home. First, you're probably not the one taking care of your kids. You probably have hired someone, which is something that absolutely, not no one, but a very, very low percent of society can actually engage in. And second, your husband has probably a second job, or he's actually partnered with you in this job.
Yeah.
So this is something that at first I started to be very worried about, but it's true that then I started to see more and more people in the comment sections of these videos in which they were saying, haha, yeah, you can be a stay-at-home mom, but I work in a supermarket and my husband is a policeman. So how are we going to afford, one of us not working in this economy? And I fully agree with these people, but at the same time, I am fascinated by how we are trying to, how can I say, justify these behaviors out of, okay, yeah, it's a free world, you can promote the thing. Yeah, but promote what you're really doing. You're not a stay-at-home mom. I'm sorry, but no. You're an entrepreneur and you have a company and you have a business and that's what you're running. And actually sometimes they're using their kids in this business. Yeah, that's something that really is pisses me off. Sorry,
Okay.
it really is crazy.
I agree. I completely agree. I think that's I think that's right. And actually, sometimes you have a lot of cases, like the case of Roro in Spain, where she then gives interviews in in normal media, and she speaks very differently than the way that she speaks in the videos, and she says that has a kind of a different relationship actually in reality than the one that is shown in the videos. Which is a great deal of this is it's business. So a lot of this content is just for the male fantasy of I would like to have that kind of wife. So it's all fake.
They're lost.
Sorry to break it, but in Romania it's not at all like this usually. For instance, the trad wife in Romania, it's really like wife that stays at home, does the dishes, cleans the children, also the husband sometimes, gives food to both because they're children usually, all of them. So it's really like when we see, when we say trad from traditional, in Romania, for instance, it really connects to traditional. It's not usually a hard-working mom that does also other business of the husband or I don't know.
But they can afford it. That's the thing, because in Spain you cannot really afford just having one person working in the household, even if you want to.
No.
They afford it, but maybe they are also pleased with less. You see, because usually the trad wife, you find it more in the rural areas, not usually in the urban areas. Usually the women in the urban areas, they tend to work somehow. Let's say part-time or doing nails or makeup in the 2-3 hours that they have free. But I think it differs from country to country and from region west versus east. Yeah. One last thing, because it's this, you mentioned also crypto, in Bitcoin and me the OnlyFans. So I think we still live in a society where even though women are doing, let's say, try to be entrepreneurial, they are judged more harshly for seeking this power versus the men that have Bitcoin or crypto investment, or also for instance, some women expect to be sexy but not too sexy, or men is he's just fine as it is, it's nothing bad if he takes his shirt off or things like that. So I think women are admired for independence on one side, but then the next moment they are really punished for it somehow. And I feel in the society nowadays, the female power is still seen as a threat. So I'm thinking, why is a young woman usually turning to OnlyFans seen as morally lost? Because it's she just lost her morals, she's doing this, so she's monetizing her body, sexualizing it, etc. While a young man investing in crypto is seen as bold and smart. So what does this say about the double standards? Because we still carry around like gender and independence problems in this area. And I think that would be my last question. Yeah, we can close with this.
Okay,
No,
so
but you answer.
yeah, no, I mean, I agree that double standards exist with that and with so many other stuff. Like investment is seen as a proper career, and sexual job is not seen as a proper job. I mean, that's clear. I do believe that a lot of people would probably regard crypto as something bad, and people who engage in crypto, would people look down on that kind of people as well. So I mean, I think there's also some criticism there. But I think that, I mean, it's the nature of always the whole thing of the thing that is most valued for women, in this case, which is sexualized kind of job, is also the thing that you don't want to have like in real life. It's just something that you watch, something that works kind of in a environment where you want to be able to say, oh, that person is of loose morals, but at the same time I engage in that content and I watch it. It's very similar to the whole thing of porn and prostitution. It's always this idea of like, yeah, I want this, but at the same time I don't want this near me,
Yeah.
And it's this, I mean, this of course this double standard of that either you are a prostitute or you are a mother, you're a saint, you're a virgin, or a prostitute. That's the two roles that have been ascribed to women traditionally. I think luckily this is changing, and my point is some part of it is changing, but not for good. I'm not sure that the fact that you can make an insane amount of money by sexualizing your body on internet is the kind of progress that we have been kind of fighting for. So even if that is something kind of legal or with some form of legal recognition in terms of a job contract or some kind of thing like that, that's not the kind of thing that we probably want to value as a society. And in the end, all of these things work because we value them. So it's again, we think about what do we value in society, and that way it's how we create social progress.
Thank you very much, Javier, for answering our questions and for engaging in a really interesting conversation with us today. I think that's it for today. We thank you very much for being present with us and listening to us until the last moment. Again, this is a long episode, but again, a very, very interesting topic. So we'll see you next time. And until then,
thank you very much. Follow us on Instagram.
Follow us again. Spotify, Instagram. And yeah.
So,
bye.
Bye.